This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Hello, this is Jacob Rees-Mogg. I'm in Somerset to try and lead Britain's conversation today, and we're going to have an interview with Henry Bolton, the former leader of UKIP, in a moment. But let's just look at what's happened to UKIP since the referendum, that it's got its seventh leader in 18 months, that after Nigel Farage it seems to have been almost unleadable. Mr Bolton had a vote of no confidence in him by the National Executive Committee, then confirmed by an extraordinary general meeting. They've got a temporary leader in place. The rating of UKIP in the polls has declined very significantly from where it was. And I suppose the questions that arise is, does UKIP now have any great purpose? Has it achieved its main object? Did it, with Nigel Farage in winning the referendum in 2016, do what it had set out to do? And therefore, does it need to be reformed in a different way? Is it unleadable? Is it so independent-minded, such a strongly held group of individual views, that it can't be led as an individual party, as a specific party? Or can it come back from its current low rating in the polls, its lack of leadership, and the way it's gone in leadership is hard to believe, actually. It's gone through so many leaders who have then got into difficulty one way and another. Where do these difficulties come from? Is there somebody trying to undermine it from within? Is there somebody pulling strings that make it very difficult? I'm hoping Henry Bolton can help us answer some of these questions and can give us a view as to what the future for UKIP is, because even as a Conservative, I recognise that UKIP played a really important role, and obviously particularly Nigel Farage, who I'm standing in for today, in getting the vote that led to us voting to leave the European Union. Without UKIP, that wouldn't have happened. But I just wonder whether history has passed on from UKIP now. So, Henry Bolton, you're in the London studio, you're in Leicester Square. Thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Good morning, Jacob. Yes, good morning.
Thank you. It can't have been an easy few weeks for you. Could you give your view of how things have gone?
Yeah, it has been a tad bumpy, I'd agree. Sort of quite relieved to have a slightly quieter day today. I mean, you've just asked some extremely pertinent questions with regards to the party, and indeed it was those questions that, in a sense, I wanted the party to answer, and unfortunately, it's answered in a way that I think is quite unfortunate and doesn't help it going forward. The question as to whether or not UKIP's done its job, well, indeed, the great purpose of UKIP was really to bring about that referendum and the decision to leave the European Union. But perhaps it hadn't thought forward to what that actually meant, how we translate leaving the European Union into how we convert that into a trajectory coming out of the European Union that actually sets up the United Kingdom in a good way for the future. So, frankly, the party dropped the ball after the referendum, and it's been rather neglected since.
But what about your role? You became the leader, then your personal life intervened. How responsible do you feel personally for what happened to you?
Well, of course, the situation in my personal life created an opportunity for those people within the party that had never accepted my leadership in the first place to express themselves. And indeed, again, you asked the question, are there people within the party trying to undermine it? I wouldn't say there are people trying to undermine it, but that disparate group of political views that were gathered together under the large, sort of all-encompassing banner of Brexit have now had an opportunity to express themselves in a clearer manner, and indeed have been quite divisive in doing so. So I think, yes, I created the initial opportunity, but it's been exploited in a damaging way.
But how much responsibility do you take? Because it must have been difficult for you and for Miss Marnie being at the centre of this media storm, but it also has done a lot of damage to UKIP. Do you think that in the circumstances you found yourself in your personal life, you should actually have resigned from the leadership first, rather than having to put UKIP through a complicated deselection process?
Well, I think had those messages that Jo Marnie had put out been of a fully public nature, had she put them into the public domain, and a lot of people actually think that she did, but indeed they were historical messages put out in a one-to-one conversation on Facebook and not in the public domain at all. They were made public later, and indeed were...
Does that really matter, whether they're public or private? Don't you think that racist views that are expressed in private are still pretty unpleasant?
I agree, and indeed I've said as much, but I think also, there is a question there as well as to how the party responded to the fact that there are people within the party who have deliberately used this to harm the party by undermining the leadership.
They couldn't have used it deliberately if it hadn't been written in the first place, could they?
Correct, but the two things in combination have done the harm. It's not one, it's not the other. It's both. Both would have done harm separately, but together, indeed, I think they've created a situation now that is almost impossible for the party to pull itself out of. And bear in mind as well that nobody on the National Executive Committee voted for me in the leadership contest. Ever since I became leader, many of them have continued to support failed leadership candidates, and indeed,
but almost two-thirds vote against you at the EGM yesterday, so it's not just your enemies on the National Executive Committee.
No, indeed, it's not. But there is quite an outcry in the party that this wasn't put to a postal ballot of all the members. Many people couldn't make it. It's a long way to travel for people, and there's a lot of dissatisfaction about that.
But aren't you evading your personal responsibility by trying to blame it onto others? That UKIP is in a mess, in part because of your personal life and information that came into the public domain of an unpleasant kind, and that shouldn't you stand up and take it on the chin and say, effectively, mea culpa? The NEC had a vote of no confidence in me. The constitutional process is that then goes to an EGM. It went to an EGM so that the members who elected me could decide what they wanted to do, and that's what I've done. So yes, I could have resigned earlier, but you know what? I actually believe that there is a greater job to be done here, and that is that we, as a party, should be unifying and putting out the message on leaving the European Union and shaping that debate on the trajectory that we come out of it on. You clearly weren't doing that job of unifying. You were clearly dividing. And because the tweets or the social media comment was racist in nature, it was allowing all the anti-UKIP stereotypes to come to the fore, and that was doing enormous harm to your party, for which you had responsibility. And then you say, well, there's a detailed process. But there's also a very simple process that you stand up and say, I resign, and you could have done that, and that might have helped solve the problem for the party sooner. I received huge support from across the country within the party and encouragement to stay on. Those people also have a right to be heard and to be represented. And indeed, my whole... But you weren't unifying the party, were you?
No, but change is often something that people don't like.
But you wanted to unify it.
Yes, but Jacob, what had happened...
But you were dividing it.
What had happened is, in the leadership campaign, I was elected on a platform of reforming the party. Now, when you try to bring about change within a party, then you'll know well that there's a great degree of resistance. And indeed, that resistance was there. We came to the point where I started talking about reform within the party. And indeed, the very unfortunate timing of the very unfortunate circumstances around my private life created a situation that made that very, very difficult indeed.
But shouldn't you therefore have realised you weren't the right person to unite the party? But Isn't that obvious? Anyway,
Jonathan Arnott MEP resigned saying that he felt that the party was not leadable because of its factions. What I was trying to do was unite them, and indeed I failed in that. Yes, I certainly fully take some of the blame for that.
Now you're not leading the party. Are you and Miss Marnie reunited? Is that some unity you've created?
We talked about it last night. It's a bit early to say what's going to happen in my private life, Jacob. I've said all along, and
I'll let that be private. You're entitled to a private life. So I'll ask you a more political question, and that is: do you want to see Nigel Farage to return? Is he the only man who can lead UKIP? Are the only one of you who can herd cats?
Jacob, Nigel is a giant of British politics, and particularly around the European Union question. But I honestly think that the party cannot be united now. I think that's very unfortunate.
Do you think we need a UKIP Mark II, or do you think your Tory-inclined members should just reunite with the Tory party?
Stop recruiting, Jacob. No, definitely not. Look, I think we will see the party take quite a lurch to the right now. I think we've seen that already with Gerard Batten's comments this morning. I think that the main bulk of the party doesn't really want to go in that direction. It wants to think about shaping the future of the United Kingdom in a comprehensive manner. What will emerge in the coming days and weeks, we have yet to see. But I suspect strongly that there are a lot of people in the party who are going to be looking around for another political home.
Do you think after Brexit is complete there will be a role for UKIP, or that will be it?
Well, in a sense, that's what my efforts have been all about. Can we to be able to shape or to influence British politics beyond the 29th of March 2019? UKIP is going to have to change. It is a bit of a protest party still at the moment, and if it wants to be a serious, grown-up and dominant influence in British politics going forward beyond Brexit, then it needs to change. It has to change. It's not fit for purpose in that respect now. So I rather fear that what happened yesterday is that change was rejected for whatever other reasons, but it's been rejected, and it's going to be weakened as a result.
End there, but can I thank you very much for coming on, that it can't be a great day for you today, and I appreciate your having the courage to put your head above the parapet and talk to me this morning.
Thank you, Jacob.
You're listening to Jacob Rees-Mogg on LBC. I'm standing in for Nigel Farage, and it is 16 minutes past 11. Hello, this is Jacob Rees-Mogg. I'm standing in for Nigel Farage, which is very appropriate because we're discussing UKIP, and we just had a chat with Henry Bolton, the former leader of UKIP, one of 7 leaders that they've had in the last 18 months, and they're now looking for a new leader. We're very keen that you should join us in this conversation, so do please call 0345 6060 973, text on 84850, tweet at LBC, or you can watch us live on Facebook for those of you of great technological sophistication. But we've got a very interesting caller coming in, a former Conservative Member of Parliament for Tatton, a seat that has very interesting Conservatives. It was held then by George Osborne and now by the absolutely brilliant Esther McVey, one of the finest members of the House of Commons. But this is Neil Hamilton, who is a leading figure in UKIP, a member of the Welsh Parliament currently. Neil, hello, how are you?
Good morning, Jacob. I'm very well, thank you.
Good morning. Are you calling from Wiltshire?
I am, yes, at the moment, yeah.
That's excellent, because Somerset and Wiltshire have a very long-standing association since King Alfred defeated the Danes in 879, so Wiltshire callers are very welcome.
Indeed, when we had the first King of all
over to you. What do you want?
And buried locally.
Excellent. So you've obviously been intimately involved with this. You know exactly what's going on in UKIP. Do you think this spells the end of UKIP as a political party?
No, I think it's a new beginning, actually. Unfortunately, Henry Bolton, I'm afraid, got into a situation where his private life actually prevented us from talking about the things that really matter, like what sort of Brexit we're going to get and what's the future of Britain after Brexit. And he seems to live in a sort of alternative universe. He thinks that although you're the leader of a political party, you can behave in your private life in a way which can be kept away from public view. Well, you and I know that's absolutely impossible. And he showed no understanding of this at any time in the last month, as a result of which the ongoing carry-on farce of his private life was laundered very, very publicly to everybody's embarrassment. And it therefore got in the way of UKIP articulating what its purpose is now, which is something which clearly we must do.
But, Neil, do you think that Mr. Bolton is a symptom or a cause? If he were the only leader who'd got into difficulties, what you're saying would be very powerful. But he's the 7th leader in 18 months. And when you look through what tripped up the other leaders, they were being tripped up for all sorts of extraordinary, simplistic mistakes that you wouldn't expect a professional political party to have in its leadership. So it's not just Mr. Bolton, it's all the others. It's Paul Nuttall who found things difficult. I mean, the names, most of them one forgets, but 7 in 18 months.
Well, I think that over-eggs the pudding, really. The problem has been that Nigel...
There's quite a lot of eggs, though, in the pudding, isn't it?
Well, no, but fundamentally, we've only had one leader since Nigel Farage gave up, and that was Paul Nuttall. We've had a series of interim leaders who, for a variety of reasons, had to be put in place. But we've only had one real leader since then, and Paul Nuttall, unfortunately, he wasn't up to the job.
But you lost one candidate in a punch-up in the European Parliament.
No, but that
we weren't quite this. We never lost. That was a candidate, but you lost a leadership candidate because of punch-up in the European Union. You lost Paul Nuttall because there were questions about the election and all sorts of things.
Yeah, I mean, there was no punch-up, actually. That was a complete set-up. Mike Hookham, who was an MEP who was accused of throwing the punch, denies that anything ever happened. So I mean, I think we must.
But I'm not
concentrate on the realities of this. You know, Nigel Farage was a super dominant leader, a highly dynamic force.
Yeah.
Nobody has had a greater effect than Nigel from outside Parliament since the war, and he was so dominant that he never brought anybody on to succeed him, and we have struggled in the interim. That's certainly true, and also we're the victims of our own success, of course, with the result of the Brexit referendum, and UKIP now has to reorient itself into a domestic...
But Neil, isn't that the key point, that you're a victim of your own success and that the leadership fandango doesn't really matter? What matters is that UKIP achieved the vote to leave, and it doesn't now have a very clear purpose. And once we've left, it's very hard to see what its role will be at all.
Well, not at all, because I lead the UKIP Assembly members in Cardiff, and we operate there in a domestic parliamentary context, in the same way as you operate in a domestic parliamentary context in Westminster, as well as the European issue. And you know, we are daily saying what we believe on the health service, on education, on the environment, etc., etc. And UKIP fought the last general election, of course, on a full UK domestic programme, and we fought the Welsh elections in May.
But nobody was interested, dare I say, in your manifesto at the last election, because people were interested in UKIP to get us out of the European Union, and what you had to say on everything else was entirely secondary, and that's why UKIP's vote went down so badly, isn't it, at the last election, because you'd achieved your purpose?
Well, I think that's right. A lot of people thought that we'd achieved our purpose, but we do have a wider purpose. And we have a vision of what Britain should be like once Brexit has been achieved. We're the only party that's... let me give you a few examples, can I, perhaps, to explain what I mean. You know, we're the only party that really believes in tough immigration control. We're the only party that thinks we should scrap most of the aid budget and put it into the health service. We're the only party in Wales that supports grammar schools, for example. We're the only party that wants to scrap green taxes, which are subsidising forests of windmills that are desecrating the countryside. There are all sorts of policies that UKIP is unique on, which the Conservative Party certainly isn't following us.
But isn't there a feeling that you've invented policies to give yourself something to do because you've achieved your main objective, and that all these policies are deeply secondary?
Well, they're obviously secondary to the overriding objective of recovering our national independence and sovereignty. There can be no more important issue in British politics, I'm sure you would agree, than that. But you know, we will achieve that sooner or later, and then we will concentrate entirely upon domestic political issues and foreign affairs, of course, but principally on domestic political issues. And we do have a particular outlook on the world which none of the other parties completely shares, or indeed shares at all in most cases.
OK, so you think clearly that there is a continuing role for UKIP and wouldn't accept my suggestion that Tory-minded UKIP members should simply rejoin the Conservative Party. Who do you think can lead it, other than Nigel Farage?
Well, I mean, Gerard Batten, I think, would make a perfectly good leader for the longer term. I mean, I don't know who may come forward. I'm not going to come forward myself because I've got a full-time job leading the party in Wales. But I think that's a secondary matter for the time being, actually. What we need to do, first of all, is to fill the gap that you pinpointed a moment ago in people's minds about what UKIP's purpose now is. And as I say,
you're the one...
have a fully costed manifesto on which we stood in the general election, which was very, very different from the Conservative manifesto in lots of important respects. And there are lots of people in UKIP who were previously in other parties, in the Labour Party, and indeed who've never been involved in politics before. So we are a grassroots movement, very different from established political parties that have been around for a very, very long time. And the Trump phenomenon in America was exactly the same as the phenomenon which created UKIP. We articulate a view which the mainstream established parties cannot do.
And you feel possibly that you may be the right man to do it for an interim period before other people are ready to try and steady the ship and bring some calm to a party you see a bright future for? Could you be persuaded? Will you announce your candidature live on LBC?
Well, the only reason I would do that is for you, Jacob, but I'm not going to.
I'd be very grateful.
Because, because, I mean, I do have a full-time job, in effect, because when the Welsh Assembly is sitting, it's 4 days a week in Cardiff, and I do have a constituency which is 75% of the landmass of Wales, and as a party leader I've got other obligations as well. But I will play my full part as part of a team leadership in UKIP, which is, I think, what we need now. We need the opposite of what Nigel provided, I think, in the short term. We don't want one super dynamic individual to lead the party, because we've got to bring everything together, and we've got a lot of hard work to do to persuade the public that we have a purpose in life post-Brexit. I believe we can do that.
Well, thank you. Thank you for calling in. It's a pleasure to hear from you, and I'm sorry I couldn't twist your arm to throw your hat into the ring. You're listening to Jacob Rees-Mogg on LBC, leading Britain's conversation from Somerset. I'm standing in for Nigel Farage. It is almost exactly 11:30. Hello, this is Jacob Rees-Mogg, leading Britain's conversation, I'm glad to say, from Somerset, where Somerset leads, the country follows. I'm standing in for Nigel Farage, and we're discussing UKIP, not surprisingly, in his absence. So you can say what you like, because he's not here to tell you off if you say the wrong thing. You can call on 0345 6060 973, text on 84850, tweet at LBC. So far, all the bigwigs from UKIP have called in. We've had Mr. Bolton himself and Neil Hamilton, a former Tory MP, call us. But I thought I'd give you a couple of texts first that we've had flooding into the office. One says, "Hello, Jacob. As a former UKIP member, I've joined the Conservative Party. So well done to Jules from Leicestershire, in the hope of being able to vote in a leadership election. Not so well done, Jules of Leicestershire, because we've got a leader, and Jules would vote for a pro-Leave candidate and doesn't see the relevance of UKIP anymore." But Bill at Gateshead says, "Morning, Jacob. No, UKIP is not finished. We need them now more than ever. If Brexit is reversed or diluted, this country will see the biggest protest vote in the country's history." Well, I certainly agree that Brexit must neither be reversed nor diluted, and that there would be a huge feeling of disillusionment with our democratic process if the vote of 17.4 million people, the biggest vote in our nation's history, were overturned. But now we're going to go to Alex in Ealing. Alex, very interested to hear if you think this spells the end of UKIP as a political party.
Hello, Jacob. Hello. Very good to speak with you. I'm a great fan of yours, actually.
Thank you.
You articulate your points extremely well, and of course you rise above the thuggish lefty students as well. I think that gains you a lot of support and a lot of admiration. On the subject of Henry Bolton, I've actually left UKIP. I was very disappointed when Henry Bolton was first elected back in October last year. In the party conference in Devon, I felt that he wasn't the right person for the job, and nonetheless, I sort of bit my tongue. I kind of wanted to see how well he would do, whether he would make good on his promises to get new party funding bring in more donors to the party, to put forward some very meaty, strong policies that people could get behind. And unfortunately, that wasn't the case. And then, of course, subsequent to that, we've had the whole Joe Marnie scandal, which has been incredibly distracting, I think, because it's distracted, as Neil Hamilton said earlier on your show, before the break, it's distracted from the core message that UKIP should be putting out there. And yes, UKIP does still, I believe, have an important role to play, because, of course, although we have voted to leave the EU, the largest vote, as you said, Jacob, in British history, 17.5 million people voting to leave the EU, we need to now ensure that Brexit means Brexit, that it's not a meaningless vote, but that people get the vote that they voted for. People did not vote for a meaningless swap. 17.5 million people would not have gone to the polls simply to, vote on something that's meaningless. They wanted us to regain control over our borders, over our fisheries, over all manner of domestic policy areas where at present that we've lost. They want us the people want us to be able to do trade deals all around the world without being encumbered by the protectionist customs union. I mean, you're very much on the same page with all of this, and I think.
Well, I agree with what you're saying. So the question I'd put to you is: do you think that UKIP at the moment needs to be in a state of suspended animation, that its role is basically completed, but it isn't finalised, and that if Brexit didn't go the right way, then there would once again be a role for UKIP? But assuming Mrs May delivers on what she's said, which I expect her to do, that Brexit means Brexit, then UKIP's basically done its job. Is that a fair summary?
No, I don't have the same confidence in Theresa May that you do, and obviously you're a member, leading MP in the party, so I would expect you to have, or certainly to express that you have full confidence in Mrs May. I do not. I feel that she is a half-hearted Brexiteer at best. She's a technocrat by nature rather than a statesperson, not a statesman. I think we have to say statesperson now, or something ridiculous.
I think we can say statesman.
She doesn't have that great leadership, I think, that people seek in a leader. But more concerningly, on Brexit itself, she has, for example, indicated that the European Court of Justice may continue to have the jurisdiction over the UK after we've left. That is completely unacceptable to us. Obviously, there's the whole issue with the transition period. I don't believe there should be a transition period, that freedom of movement, for example, should end as soon as we leave the EU in March.
I agree with that, yes.
Yeah. And so there is a great deal that the government, in my view, should be pressurized into changing in terms of its Brexit negotiations. I don't think the government, has been robust enough with the EU. We've sort of caved in to far too many of the EU's demands. And I think that, therefore, UKIP does have a role to play. I always make the point...
Well, thank you very much for that. To summarise what you're saying, and some people may hear the crackling fire in the background from where I'm broadcasting, you think that UKIP's there to hold the Conservative government's feet to the fire. That's its main purpose in coming years. I've had a couple of Facebook messages, people watching live on Facebook. One from Maureen, who joined UKIP because of their common sense policies. I wonder if she still thinks their policies are common sense. And a splendid inquiry from Lucy. Have I been asked by Toff to appear on Made in Chelsea? No, I haven't. But I have been asked by the Sunday Times to be interviewed by her. So I'm looking forward to doing that at some point. And Andrew, so I said I'd do two, I'll do three, says he doesn't think UKIP have showed them in a very good light. Oh, and Derek says Conservatives don't want you, Jacob. So there we go, Derek. Thank you for that view. It's very important we get a range of views, keeps Ofcom happy. And now I'm going to go to Nathaniel in Dover. So Dover at the edge, really, of our relationship with the continent, the point where so much trade goes to and fro and people come in and out. So, Nathaniel, you know what's going on. What do you think is going on?
Absolutely. To the point I can see Calais from my bedroom window, is how close we are to France.
Right. Well, Calais used to be English, but we lost it in the reign of Mary Tudor.
God, it's going back a few years, yeah.
It is, one or two.
I'm speaking declaration, by the way. I'm a councillor in Dover District Council, so I'm witnessing firsthand what's going on with UKIP. And we actually had a UKIP councillor resign last night. And to be honest with you, they probably still have a purpose until Brexit has happened, but they've obliterated themselves. They haven't done themselves any favour whatsoever, because our neighbouring council, Thanet District Council, is the only UKIP-controlled council in the UK. And it's that fractured to the point that half of the UKIP councillors voted against their council leader last month and have put a thing of no confidence towards their leader because they rejected the draft local plan the national government set out, which has caused quite a stir in the area, to be fair with you. These guys have pressed the self-destruct button. The minute Farage left, after the last two general elections ago now, they've been on a path of self-destruction, and it's prevalent to see. I mean, you've had, was it 8 leaders in a year?
I think 7, but everyone's losing count. But what you're saying is so interesting. UKIP can't get leaders locally, let alone nationally, without having votes of no confidence in them. It's pretty chaotic, isn't it? Yeah.
Absolutely. We're down to... when I got elected back in May, just gone, in the local elections, UKIP got wiped out in this area, absolutely wiped out. Most of the votes, unfortunately, went to your party, but Celavi. And it's one of those where all of this infighting, all of the controversies that's been across the media, everyone can't be bothered with it, I don't think, and I think people are switching off to it. And I think they did play an important part in the election. I was an undecided up until the day of election, to be fair with you, because there were so many things to and fro-in. And I feel... But
which way did you go in the end?
I just about went Remain. And the reason I went Remain was actually about the security.
Okay, which we've settled yesterday, and that was our earlier discussion. But you're listening to Jacob Rees-Mogg on LBC. I'm standing in for Nigel Farage, and it is fractionally after 11:45, a quarter to midday. Hello, it's Jacob Rees-Mogg, leading Britain's conversation from Somerset, and in the last quarter of an hour we haven't had any leaders, former leaders or leadership contenders from UKIP call in, which is a pity because we've had a couple of them earlier, or at least one former leader, and Neil Hamilton, who leads them in Wales. We're discussing the future of UKIP, whether it has one at the moment, and we've had lots of messages and text. You can text on 84850 or call on 0345 6060 973. And we've had a great text from Andrea in Virginia Water, who says, "Hello, Jacob. Firstly, few sounds more reassuring than the crackle of a fire, so keep it fed. Secondly, what I absolutely do not understand is why anyone would want to stay in the EU after the way we've been treated since the vote. Have asked one simple question to so many people, and no one, Remainers included, can come up with a single answer, and that is, what have they given us to try to get us to want to stay? The answer is always a bemused silence." Well, Andrew, I think you make a very good point, but we're not allowed bemused silences on the radio because everyone then switches it off. And I want to go to Pam in Tunbridge Wells because I want to find out, Pam, if you'll forgive the terrible old joke, are you disgusted? Or what are your views on UKIP? Pam, are you there?
I'm there, and I'm not disgusted at all about UKIP. In fact, I'm very optimistic.
Oh, good. Oh, good.
Only because...
What do you think its future is?
Well, it has a future simply because there is a space in British politics, and that space is to speak for the voice of ordinary people in this country, because none of the other mainstream parties are doing that at the moment. The political class has become totally decoupled from ordinary citizens. And UKIP has...
Okay, can I ask you one question on that? I'm always very concerned about this term ordinary people because I think it sets up politicians as if they're some priestly caste and that there are out there ordinary people. Don't you think everybody is special in their own way, is important, and that ordinary people, dare I say, it's a slightly condescending way of thinking about British voters?
Well, ordinary people are special, and they are individually special. Sadly, the political class don't seem to think that.
Good, yes.
And have sneered at them, the likes of Emily Thornberry, Gordon Brown. You know, they've all had a pop at the people they're meant to represent. So
yes, I do quibble on the use of the word ordinary, because I don't think any British voter is ordinary. I think they are great individual people.
Well, I totally agree with you there, Jacob. But
I think this is... Oh, good, because I think that plays in to this division between the metropolitan elite and the electors is the phraseology around ordinary people, that what one wants to recognise as a Member of Parliament is that the voters are my employer, they're my boss, they're the people I report to, and then you get the relationship between the elected representatives and the electors, right?
Well, I think people aren't feeling they are...
Do you agree with that?
Well, I think people feel they aren't being represented properly. And in fact, I think there is a seismic shift in politics across the Western globe anyway. And it's along the lines of this citizen of nowhere, citizens of somewhere. And I think that's what we're seeing. It's been sunlit uplands for the citizens of nowhere who have benefited from freedom of movement, mass immigration, nice cheap nannies, nice cheap lattes. It's the citizens of somewhere who've taken the hit on the whole thing. It's them that have seen suppression of their wages. It's them that have seen that they have had to accommodate the 3 million people that have come here. No extra housing's been provided for them. It's them that's had to shove over and make way. And it's them that haven't had a voice.
Yes.
And they haven't had a voice.
But these are the arguments of the referendum, and we've now voted to leave. So what does UKIP do next?
Right. So we now need to address the situation that we need to go back to where we were and find jobs for people, which again has been ignored. We've closed down the mines, we've closed down our industry, and no one thought at any time, what are all the people in the northeast of England, what are they going to do? The Labour government came up with a solution of feeding them with benefits. Well, that hasn't worked, because all you have now is completely decimated communities with massive drug problems and benefit dependent. No one sat down at any point and thought, these good people who built our nation, we're dumping them on the slag heap. What are we going to do with them? What have we got to offer instead? And none of the political parties have come up with an alternative in 40 years.
Well,
people like Gordon Brown...
Pam, are you going to announce your candidature to be leader of UKIP? Because you've got a clear programme, which is more than any of the other leaders have had in the last 18 months. I think UKIP probably needs you.
Well, plenty of people...
But I'd better go to...
exactly as me.
Well, you put your head above the parapet. I think that's great. So thank you for calling in. And we've had some more messages come in. Carrie says, Jacob, am I burning EU laws or logs? I confess that they are logs rather than EU laws, but no harm in burning the odd EU law. And now I'd like to go to Dennis in Bournemouth. Dennis, are you there in Bournemouth, by the seaside?
Yes, indeed I am, yes. Hello.
Well, welcome. Hello, what do you think the future of UKIP is?
Well, I think we've got to stop being distracted by UKIP. They are a spent force, but the interesting thing, there is a job that was done by UKIP, and that's a job that still needs to be done. So it needs to be done by another organisation. Now, we've got Leave Means Leave, which you're a member of. You've got your European Research Group. We've got the Campaign for an Independent Britain and so on. But all these are disparate organisations. We need a constituency-based campaign. We mustn't forget that 600 out of the 650 constituencies, 65% of them, 420, voted to leave. So we do need an organisation, but it needs to be not the Tories, doesn't need to be Liberal or Labour. It needs to be cross-party. And we need someone...
And would this be a movement or a political party?
No, it will be a campaign, a movement.
A campaign group, like Vote Leave or Go?
Well, they need
that
to be
type
coordinated.
Of movement.
At the moment, Remain is dominating the debate. We've also got this bombshell sitting down the road, the meaningful vote in Parliament, which could scupper Brexit altogether. And what we need...
Well, I don't think it can, actually. I think the meaningful vote is either that we leave with a deal or without a deal. I don't think it can reverse the referendum. That's certainly not in the legislation. And we'd have to rejoin.
Really want to go into that, Jacob. What I'm saying is that there needs to be
a movement.
Unified campaign, and we need someone to lead it. Now,
well, I want to get in one more caller before we have to go to the news, so thank you for that. And can I go to Linda in Basildon? Linda, are you there?
Yes, I am, Jacob.
We're very pleased to hear the voice of Basildon, which was so important in the 1992 general election. So, Linda, what's your view on UKIP?
I think it's disappointing that since Nigel Farage left, UKIP have basically focused on internal shenanigans instead of putting together a clear programme, of direction of travel post winning the referendum. Yes, we did secure the leave vote, but what we should have been sort of focusing on almost immediately is what kind of post-Brexit Britain we would like to see. And basically I feel like we've thrown away, it's been a lost opportunity. And until such time as they readdress that issue, reform, professionalise, put their policies together, then the 2% in the polls for UKIP won't be heading in the up direction anytime soon.
Well, thank you very much. That's a very helpful view. The voice of reason from Basildon. And I just wanted to read out a view from the New Forest, where two wonderful MPs, Desmond Swain and Julian Lewis, represent strong Brexit views. But this is from Ian Linney, who says, I and many other UKIPers believe that Mr Bolton is a Lib Dem saboteur, a party he belonged to. His plan to finish off the party, now Mr Bolton has been ousted, hopefully UKIP can move forward again. That's an interesting view. This is Jacob Rees-Mogg. I've been standing in for Nigel Farage. Coming up at 3, it's Alex Salmond. But next, Majid Nawaz.
Thank you, Mr Mogg. Coming up.